Okay, well, I'll tell you this much. I'm falling for it every time. I'm falling for it largely because I'm just a George fan and I want to see him fight. But I am starting to think more and more that me and you and everybody else are all getting suckered in because, here's the backstory on George. He's got incredible sponsors. He's got Gatorade. He's got Bacardi rum. He's got Under Armour. He's got some mainstream sponsors that nobody else in this space has been able to touch. And that's got to dry up at some point, right? When your name quits getting out there, when you're not making that walk and getting in there and having all these promotional tours behind it, all of a sudden you lose value to those guys. So George would be incentivized to keep his name out there, keep you and I and everybody else talking to him. I saw him on UFC Tonight the other day. He would have a definite motivation to do that. The other side of it is he jumped in the USADA pool. He's now saying, give me Tyron Woodley, I'll sign right now. He's now saying there's a show in Toronto in a matter of months, and I'm ready to compete on it. So I am still falling for it. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I think George is going to fight again. But if he doesn't fight in Toronto, I'm out. I will not plug George, I just won't, because when he passed up on UFC 200, Chris, look, the way his contract works and with the back-end points that he gets, he was staring at a floor of $12 million and a ceiling of 15 based on projections. So if he's not going to come back for 10 to 15 million, he's got the same contract. Even if he fights in Toronto, he does great. He could do 5 to 6 million. Good payday, but if you're not coming back for 15, you're not coming back for 5. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it'd be interesting. I'd like to see him come back. I think that shakes up that division again, but we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. He's playing the headlines for sure. So
yeah.
I'm with you. I'm still interested, but you bring up a good point. If he doesn't come back for Toronto, I don't know where else the time would be to step in.
Yeah, no, I don't see so either. And when you bring up shaking things up, him versus Tyron, yeah, sure, I'm in. Him versus Nick Diaz, I'm in even more. Even though the title's not on the line, I'm in for that fight even more. Then there's been this talk about a catchweight, George versus Conor at 160. Well, that's going to break every record in the history of records. And then George himself is saying, look, I was never really a 70-pounder. I weighed about 79, 80. I could go 155. I don't think there's a total motivation for him to do it. But as far as parity goes, now you're talking about him versus Eddie Alvarez. Just go through the list. There are so many things you could do with George.
Yeah, I agree. He's still young. He's still got the name value, everything. And I think people would be excited to see him come back because it's been some years since he's been gone. And like we said, shaken up. Like the UFC's completely changed as far as, the fighters that were around when he was in that are gone. So it brings back those super fights where the stars now, you want to see him fight one of the older stars. And he's not old, and it wasn't that long ago, but the UFC has changed so much in just a short amount of time that it would be awesome to see him have that comeback and fight some of these guys that have had a chance to build themselves up since he's been gone.
Yeah, and then, he's one of those nut bars that just really enjoys exercise. He got into gymnastics, but when he got into it, he started going every day, and then when he travels, he always lines up workouts. If he's in L.A., boom, he's over at Wild Card getting rounds in with Freddie Roach. When he's at home, he's working out and in the gym every day. I hear that from his own teammates. You always hear John Jones saying, oh, I'm in the gym and I'm working hard. Then I talk to one of his teammates. They're like, man, I haven't seen John since I don't know when. With George, you talk to George's teammates, he's the first guy in the room. He's the last guy to leave, and he's training for nothing. He's just one of those nuts that loves working out. So, yeah, man, he could step in right now. I saw George on UFC Tonight. He said something that was interesting, because it was very objective. And he said, if I come back, I can't come back the same George. He said the sport gets better all the time. I've been out since 2013. The sport is much better now than when I was in there, and I was struggling in my last fight with Johnny. He said, if I come back, I've got to be better than I ever was. And he's right. That's good, objective talk from a guy that is essentially undefeated in the last decade. I realize the Matt Serra miss or whatever, but he's essentially undefeated. But that's why, it's that work ethic, it's that attitude, and it's that understanding that just because I'm the champ doesn't mean I'm the best. There's another guy coming up all the time. I don't know, man. I hope George comes back, but I'm ready to tell you, Chris, if he doesn't come back by Toronto, I'm out. He can count me off the bandwagon. I'm not helping him perpetuate this rumor anymore.
So I got a loaded question for you then.
All right, I love it.
All right. So it's your job to match him up. Who do you give George as his first fight coming back?
Okay, dream fight. Here's the likely suspects. The Nick Diaz one is likely just because they both want to do it and they both got a beef. If you bring him back and he wants a title fight and you're Dana, you have to give it to him. He was the champion that never lost the title. Nobody's going to complain. No reporter, nobody in the division, nobody bitches if George St. Pierre cuts the line. But if you're asking me the ultimate contest, I would catch weight him, and I would do it against Conor.
Okay.
And it's not going to be overly competitive. It's not going to be overly competitive, but boy, is that going to draw.
I agree with you. I said loaded question because Joe Silva's on his way out, and I always text you every time there's something like that, and I've always thought, I'm not the only one that thinks this, I've always thought that if you're not going to fight again, you should have a job with the UFC. So my text the other day, but I figured, I'm like, this guy's probably getting annoyed with me, was when I heard Joe Silva was stepping aside, I'm like, man, why doesn't Chael step in as matchmaker? He's good at selling fights. He knows the game, this, that. So that was why it was a loaded question, because I wanted you to play Joe Silva's shoes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, yeah, those are some hard shoes. Yeah, and then here's the other thing with Conor. And Conor's amazing. There was some question marks, and is it all talk? And even when he won the title, it's like, yeah, but he only threw one punch, and it happened to land. I mean, there was just some stuff there where it just wasn't quite time to go, yeah, this guy's incredible. This guy's damn good, but is he incredible? He's incredible, man. He moved up 2 weight classes, got his ass kicked, demanded the exact same fight, changed his game plan. People talked about, well, he was running and stuff. No, man, he told us ahead of time, I'm going to save my energy. I'm going to make it 25 minutes. He did it. He did everything he said he was going to do, and he won. But, and here's the but, at some point, if you're going to maintain a division, you got to stick a guy in his division. What do? If you put him with George, yes. If George and he agrees, you do that fight, but then you've got to strip him. If you strip him, what do you do with Jose? What do you do? Yeah, there's some other moving parts aside from just putting a big fight together. When you think long term, you got to get a guy into a division. You have to be able to build a division. So that would be the devil's advocate to that argument. But the bottom line is, if you get Conor and George to say yes and you come up with a weight cut, man, you have to make that fight. You have to. You have no choice. Greed would get in the way of everything else. You got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Conor's making these guys money, but he's also making Joe's job tough, because I agree with you. At some point, you have to pick a division and stick with it. You can't do, super fights or super fights, because they don't come around all the time. You can't have one guy that just fights any division, everybody he wants. Eventually, it kind of, I don't know if it plays out, but it's tough, man. I always picture when I saw, Conor talking about bouncing around or getting ready for these other fights, I'm like, man, it's got to be rough on Joe Silva, because, like you said, there's so many moving parts. As soon as they lined Conor up to fight Nate that second time, I'm sure Joe Silva had every guy in the 45-pound division texting him like, "What the hell's going on? Make a interim title or strip this guy." Because if I'm number 1, number 2 contender in that 45-pound division, I'm like, well, what the hell? This guy's freezing everybody up while he gets to do what he wants. But at the same time, he's right. He's the draw. He's making money. It's a tough position to be in.
Yeah, well, imagine if you're poor Max Holloway, right? You are the guy. You've beaten everybody. You've proved yourself. You've headlined shows. You've finished fight. You've done everything you need to do. But in your heart, if Conor comes back, I'm not getting that shot. And that's just the way it is. So, yeah, there's just so many moving things, particularly when you're a company like the UFC that's doing 53 shows this year. There's only 52 weeks in the year. They're putting on 53 events. It's tough. it's tough because they're planning 4 and 5 moves ahead. These guys are chess players, whereas some smaller organizations can play checkers. They can think about this week, this night, let's do it, and then we'll figure things out on Monday. The UFC is so many steps ahead, but that's just the way the machine's built. They have to be. So I don't know what you do. Hey, let me ask you this. Let me switch gears to this weekend.